the Lord be with you, and a warm welcome to you from all of us here at Powerscourt with Kilbride. Well, if you're still present in this little square after a month away, I'm delighted to be back with you here again. It's lovely to be sitting underneath the boughs of our gorgeous chestnut tree in a sort of an autumnal setting. A lot has happened in the month that Ed and I and the family have been away, and around me the ground is littered with beautiful golden leaves, and as you'll see from the introduction to our service, the autumn has certainly hit, although we are experiencing a bit of an Indian summer at the moment, so we're blessed. And we've had just such a remarkable time away on the other side of the world in Australia. 4 weeks living on the very close outskirts of such a magnificent city has been an experience in itself. I realised in my long-leggedy life that bar Dublin and London and a quick whistle-stop tour many years ago of Phoenix, I've never actually lived for any length of time whatsoever or been in proximity to a very, very large city, and it's interesting to note all the differences. Melbourne itself, one thing that really struck me about it was its mishmash of architecture. You have cathedrals that are a couple of hundred years old, and you have in amongst them towering skyscrapers of a really modern design. So you have the ancient looking with the modern, and it works so beautifully well, with a tram to take you everywhere across this meshwork of streets within the city of Melbourne itself. The whole city folds itself around the Yarra River, and it really is absolutely magnificent. So that in itself was a really interesting experience. I can tell you that I have at least 6 assemblies, given that I love all the created order. I made it my duty to embrace the Australian created order by going to hand feed kangaroos and emus in Phillip Island to observe the penguin parade, the penguins, little penguins they're called, their official name, that come in onto the coastline of Phillip Island every evening. And this particular time of year, all their little individual chicks are in nests that surround the whole area, and they come in onto the cloak of darkness, and we're allowed to sit quietly and watch them. And they stop and listen for the sound of their own chick, and they go in to feed. It is quite an incredible experience. So I am looking forward, as the weeks progress, not to bore you to insanity with talk about Australia, but to pop in images and possibly thoughts that might occur and be related to the grander scale of things when we think about the divine. You may be wondering, how can she possibly take the rather remarkable experience of being in Melbourne and put it on top of the very reason and the even better experience that drew us there in the first place? Our number one experience in the past month was witnessing, just from a step outside the door, if you like, the birth of our first grandchild to our beloved daughter Claire, who has been in Australia for the last 7 years, has fallen in love with her now fiancé Tyson, and together they produced this magnificent little baby boy. And Taru means moon in the Gunditjmara language of his dad's people. So it's just remarkable, and it's a dreadfully bittersweet thing to come away such a distance from our little family in Oz. But I know that many of you in this square are experiencing similar things, and as Khalil Gibran would say to you, the children in your life are the arrows that are shot from your bow. I know I'm putting that very badly, but we need to let them go. In other words, we need to let them prosper, and we couldn't be happier. And I'll talk a little bit more about this later on in our service. But first, and as always, we just ready ourselves now as we focus on the presence of the divine with us in this short time together. And we pause for a moment in the silence of presence, which is in itself the deepest of prayers. They went on from there and passed through Galilee. He did not want anyone to know it, for he was teaching his disciples and saying to them, "The Son of Man is to be betrayed into human hands, and they will kill him. And 3 days after being killed, he will rise again." But they did not understand what he was saying, and were afraid to ask him. Then they came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about on the way?" But they were silent. For on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. He sat down, called the 12, and said to them, "Whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all." Then he took a little child and put it among them, and taking it in his arms, he said to them, "Whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not me, but the one who sent me." Little ones make all the difference. Little ones change things. The main reason for our journey over to Australia was, as mentioned, the birth of our first grandchild to our eldest daughter Claire and her fiancé Tyson. And so on the 22nd of August last, a little baby boy was born. His name is Taru, which in the Gunditjmara language of his father's people means moon. And there was a special moon the week that he was born in Australia, and it was one of those cases where the child almost chooses his own name. He fitted so beautifully well that any doubts about a name or any questions they might have asked between themselves as to what the child should be called were instantly dismissed when Claire held him in her arms. And in listening to her recount the birth to us afterwards, and in seeing the changes within her, it reminded me of that first time that she was placed on my own tummy, on the outside for a change, after 9 months of growing close to her on the inside of myself. And looking into her face, a change occurred in myself. And I remember saying to Ed not long after that, if you never believed in God, you would absolutely believe in a higher power at that moment, because amidst the rawness and the pain of childbirth, you are presented with this gift of life. And what I wanted to very briefly touch on today is the change that occurs within an individual when presented with a little soul to call their own and to care for the rest of their days. In one fleeting second, in one moment, unplanned and never expected, because how could you? Something changes within the heart and the soul of an individual. And they change from their focus being upon their own life. That's not in a selfish way, it's just all they have ever known, to completely focusing on the well-being and care of another person. It is the highest and the deepest form of love. There's no doubt whatsoever about this. And I've watched it in my own child, as in so many other mothers. And she is exhausted, increasingly exhausted, as they try to set the routine, and she's feeding little Taru herself. And even in the exhaustion on her face, she keeps saying to me, "Mom, I look at him and I can't believe it. I am so grateful." And I know in the sadness of us all coming away from her, she is left with the love of her life, not only in her husband-to-be, but in this little soul that has completely, at a second's appearance, changed her way of being. In our Gospel from St. Mark's Gospel this morning, Jesus is walking along the road with his disciples, and he has already explained to them that very difficult conversation that says that he will be taken from them, he will be killed, and he will then return to them. And of course you can understand that they just can't get it, they can't conceive of it. And so they're discussing things among themselves along the road. And when he gets to Capernaum, I think it is, when they arrive at where they're going, he asks them, what were you talking about? Now you and I both know that Jesus knows exactly what they were talking about, but it's drawing them out into conversation. And so he's asking them, what were you talking about on the road? And they fall silent. They hadn't got the courage to talk to him about what they were talking about, but we know that they were talking about, in the face of this great loss, who would take over, who would become in charge. And, you know, many people that I have listened to and read with regard to this particular piece of scripture would tell you it might have been a very interesting conversation, because in that panic and in that fear of the loss of the Messiah, this Yeshua who is theirs, they revert to the worldly ways. They're possibly competitive with one another. And Jesus knows this. And so he says to them, if anybody wants to follow me, you must become last. You must have that change of heart and soul. You must turn from looking for your own betterment or your own acknowledgement. So, in other words, if they were worrying about somebody taking over, if they were thinking it should be themselves, it was the ego. If they were thinking, who can it be? It was fear. It's all self-related, if you understand what I mean. What he's saying to them is, if you want to follow me, you're going to have to make that change within yourself that no longer looks for your own welfare above everybody else, but looks instead to the benefit of the other. Little ones, change things. He tells them to summon a little child, and he stands the little child in front of him, and then he takes it up into his arms. I love that small phrase in that scripture. He gathers the child into his arms. He says, every time you welcome one of these little ones, you welcome me. And when you welcome me, you welcome the one who sent me. Power is turned on its head. It's a different way of being. It's a different power. It's our ability to be able to love the other person freely, without comparison, without fear, without all those complicating things that the world gives us. And within my own life, I have witnessed this form of love in my own child, through the appearance, through the birth of my grandchild. And so today, I give thanks not only for little Rue, as we call him now, for his safe delivery, but for children all over the world. The little ones that I was with, joyously with, only this morning in school assembly, who make my heart sing because of their vulnerability, because of their fascination for life, their joy of life, all of these, and there are so many attributes to children at whatever age you find them. All of these are glimpses of the divine. They truly are. And what they can do within us, what change this exacts within us, that's where you find the type of divine love that Jesus is talking about. Little ones do most definitely make all the difference.